The blood on her dress had frozen solid by the time Zachary Powell found her stumbling through the snowdrifts 2 miles outside of Eureka, Nevada. And he knew without asking that she would not survive another hour in the blizzard that had turned the December afternoon into a white hell. He had been tracking a runaway mare when he spotted the dark shape moving against the wall of snow, weaving like a drunkard, and his first thought was that someone had been fool enough to leave the settlement during the storm. His second thought, as he urged his gelding closer and saw the crimson stains spreading across the pale fabric of her traveling dress, was that she had been running from something worse than the weather. She collapsed before he reached her, crumpling into the snow with a soft cry that the wind nearly swallowed. Zachary swung down from his horse and reached her in 3 long strides, his gloved hands already checking for a pulse at her throat. Her skin was cold as marble, lips blue, eyelashes crusted with ice, but her heart still beat, weak and fluttering beneath his fingers. "Madam," he said urgently, shaking her shoulder. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of storm clouds, unfocused and glassy with cold and shock. She tried to speak, but only a rattling wheeze emerged from her throat. The blood on her dress, he saw now, came from a gash on her side, hastily wrapped with what looked like a torn petticoat. The makeshift bandage had soaked through hours ago. Zachary did not waste time with more questions. He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shaking frame, then lifted her into his arms as easily as he might lift a child. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel every rib through the layers of frozen fabric. Whatever had happened to her, she had been suffering for more than just the few hours since the storm began. His gelding, a steady gray named Smoke, stood patient as Zachary maneuvered the woman onto the saddle. She had lost consciousness again, her head lolling against his chest as he mounted behind her, one arm locked around her waist to keep her from falling. The mare he had been tracking was long forgotten. Getting this woman to shelter before the cold finished what her injury had started was all that mattered now. The wind howled like a living thing as Zachary turned Smoke back toward Eureka, bending low over the woman's body to shield her from the worst of it. The town was only 2 miles distant, but it might as well have been 20 in conditions like these. Visibility extended barely 5 feet in front of his horse's nose. The snow fell so thick and fast that it filled in their tracks almost as quickly as they made them. He had grown up in this country, had ridden these trails since he was 8 years old, and still he had to rely more on instinct than sight to guide them home. The woman in his arms shivered violently, then went still, and that frightened him more than her shaking had. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat again, checking for her pulse, and found it even weaker than before. "Stay with me," he said into her ear, knowing she could not hear him but needing to speak anyway. "Just a little further now, stay with me." The lights of Eureka appeared through the curtain of snow like a miracle, warm yellow squares glowing in the gathering darkness. Zachary had never been so grateful to see the ramshackle collection of buildings that made up the mining town. He guided Smoke directly to the doctor's office on the main street, a narrow building squeezed between the general store and a boarding house. Dr. Samuel Morrison was a gruff man in his 50s, who had seen more than his share of gunshot wounds, mining accidents, and winter ailments in his 20 years in Eureka. He took one look at the woman in Zachary's arms and ushered them inside without a word, clearing the papers off his examination table with a sweep of his arm. "Put her here," Morrison said. "What happened?" "Found her in the snow about 2 miles out," Zachary said, laying her down as gently as he could. "She has been bleeding. Looks like a knife wound, maybe. Hard to tell." Morrison was already cutting away the frozen layers of her dress with a pair of scissors, revealing the makeshift bandage beneath. When he pulled it away, Zachary had to look aside. The wound was worse than he had thought, a deep slash across her ribs that had stopped bleeding only because of the cold. "Get me hot water from the stove there," Morrison ordered, nodding toward the pot-bellied stove in the corner. "And fetch Mrs. Chen from the boarding house. I will need her help." Zachary did as he was told, moving quickly. By the time he returned with the water, Morrison had stripped away most of the woman's ruined clothing and covered her with a thick wool blanket. Her skin was so pale it looked transparent, blue veins visible beneath the surface like rivers on a map. Mrs. Chen arrived within minutes, a tiny Chinese woman with quick hands and a calm demeanor that made her invaluable in emergencies. She and Morrison worked together in practiced silence, cleaning the wound, stitching it closed, wrapping it in clean bandages. Zachary stood back against the wall, feeling useless and strangely reluctant to leave. "Will she live?" he asked after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. Morrison looked up from washing his hands in a basin. "Maybe. The wound itself is not fatal, but she has lost a lot of blood, and the exposure to the cold." He shook his head. "The next few hours will tell. If she wakes, she has a chance. If not—" He did not need to finish the sentence. Zachary understood death well enough. He had seen it often enough in his 26 years, had dealt it himself when necessity demanded. But the thought of this unknown woman dying after he had worked so hard to bring her to safety bothered him in a way he could not quite name. "I will sit with her," he heard himself say. Morrison raised an eyebrow. "You do not even know who she is." "Does not matter, I will sit with her," the doctor shrugged. "Suit yourself. I have rounds to make before this storm gets any worse. Mrs. Chen, you stay here and keep an eye on her temperature. If she starts to fever, send someone to fetch me immediately." After Morrison left, Mrs. Chen set about heating bricks on the stove and wrapping them in flannel to place around the woman's body. Zachary pulled a chair close to the examination table and sat, studying the woman's face properly for the first time. She was young, he realized, probably not more than 22 or 23. Her face was thin, cheekbones too prominent, but even in unconsciousness he could see she must have been beautiful when she was healthy. Dark hair, nearly black, spread across the pillow in tangled waves. Her features were delicate, fine-boned, the face of someone who had been born to comfort rather than hardship. "Who are you?" he murmured, half to himself. "And what in God's name were you running from?" Mrs. Chen glanced at him but said nothing. She tucked the heated bricks around the woman's body, then checked her pulse and breathing. "Very weak," she said in her soft, accented English, "but still fighting. This one has strength in her." "I hope you are right," Zachary said. The storm raged through the night, wind rattling the windows and piling snow against the buildings in huge drifts. Zachary dozed in his chair, jerking awake at every sound, checking each time to make sure the woman still breathed. Mrs. Chen left around midnight, replaced by Morrison, who checked his patient's vital signs and shook his head. "Still touch and go," he said. "But she has made it this far. That is something." Dawn came late and gray, the storm finally beginning to ease as thin light filtered through the windows. Zachary stood and stretched, his back aching from the uncomfortable chair, and walked to the window. The street outside was buried under 2 feet of fresh snow, and more buildings were dark. Most of the town would be spending the day digging out. "Water," a voice whispered behind him, so faint he almost missed it. Zachary spun around. The woman's eyes were open, those storm-gray eyes fixed on him with desperate intensity. Her lips moved again. "Water, please." He grabbed the pitcher from Morrison's desk and poured a cup, then helped her lift her head enough to drink. She managed only a few sips before falling back, exhausted by even that small effort. "Easy now," Zachary said gently. "Do not try to move too much. You are hurt pretty bad." Her eyes studied his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You found me," she whispered. "In the snow." "Yes, madam, about 2 miles outside town. You carried me." It was not a question. "I did not have much choice. You would not have lasted another hour out there." Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you for my life." Before he could respond, her eyes drifted closed again, but this time it was the peaceful unconsciousness of sleep rather than the frightening stillness of before. Her breathing deepened, her face relaxed. Morrison chose that moment to return, stamping snow from his boots. "She wake at all?" he asked. "Just now. Asked for water, took a few sips." "Good, that is very good." The doctor moved to the table and checked her pulse again, then lifted one of her eyelids to peer at her pupil. "Color is better. Temperature is coming back to normal. I think she will make it after all." Relief washed through Zachary with surprising force. "When will she be strong enough to talk properly? I have questions." "I imagine you do. Half the town will have questions once word gets around that you brought in a mysterious injured woman during the blizzard." Morrison gave him a knowing look. "But she will need days, maybe weeks, to recover her strength. Whatever happened to her, it was not just the knife wound. She is severely malnourished, dehydrated. She has been suffering for a while." Zachary nodded slowly. "I will come back this evening to check on her." "You going soft on me, Powell?" Morrison asked with a slight smile. "I have known you for 5 years, and I cannot recall you ever showing this much concern for a stranger." "Just want to make sure my effort was not wasted," Zachary said gruffly, but he knew it was more than that. Something about the woman's courage, surviving long enough for him to find her, fighting to stay alive through the night, had reached a part of him he usually kept locked away. He spent the day taking care of necessary business, checking on his horses, helping some of the older residents dig out from the storm, stopping by the Silver Dollar Saloon for a hot meal. But his thoughts kept returning to the doctor's office and the dark-haired woman lying there. When he returned that evening, Morrison told him she had woken twice more, each time a little stronger than the last. She had managed to eat a few spoonfuls of broth and keep them down. Good signs, all of them. "Has she said anything else? About what happened to her?" Zachary asked. "Not to me. But you can ask her yourself if you want. She is awake now." Zachary found her propped up slightly on the table, pillows supporting her back. In the lamplight, with some color returned to her face, he could see he had been right about her beauty. Those gray eyes tracked him as he approached, wary but curious. "Evening, madam," he said, pulling the chair close again. "I am Zachary Powell. I am the one who found you yesterday." "Olivia Harper," she said, her voice still weak but clearer than before. "I remember you, from the snow. You wrapped me in your coat. Seemed like the thing to do." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Miss Harper, I do not mean to pry, but the doctor and we have been wondering what happened to you, how you came to be out in that storm, injured like you were." Her eyes flickered away from his, fixing on the ceiling. For a long moment she said nothing, and Zachary thought she might refuse to answer. Then she spoke, her words measured and careful. "I was traveling from Virginia City with my father and brother. We were moving to California, supposed to meet the wagon train in Carson City." She paused, swallowing hard. "We camped about 10 miles from here 3 nights ago. During the night, men came, outlaws. They wanted our supplies, our money." Zachary felt his jaw tighten. "Go on." "My father tried to fight them. They killed him. My brother, too." Her voice remained steady, but tears spilled down her cheeks. "They would have killed me as well, but one of them had other ideas. Their leader, he had a different plan for me, said I would fetch a good price in California. The implication was clear enough, and it made Zachary's blood run cold. They were slavers, of a sort. The leader, he got into an argument with one of the other men about it. The other man did not want to wait, wanted his turn with me right then. They fought, and in the confusion I grabbed a knife and cut my way out of the tent. The one who had been guarding the entrance tried to stop me. That is where this came from. She touched her bandaged side gingerly. I managed to get away in the dark, but they came after me. I ran for hours. I heard them searching, shouting. Then the storm hit and I could not hear them anymore, could not hear anything but the wind. And you just kept walking. I did not know what else to do. I knew there had to be a town somewhere nearby. My father had said we were close to Eureka. I just had to find it. She looked at him again, and the gratitude in her eyes made his chest ache. If you had not found me when you did. But I did find you, Zachary said firmly. You are safe now. Those men are not going to touch you. How can you be sure? What if they are still looking for me? Let them look. They will not find you here. He leaned forward, making sure she could see the determination in his face. I give you my word, Miss Harper. I will not let anyone hurt you. It was a bold promise, possibly foolish, but he meant every syllable. The thought of those men laying hands on her again filled him with a fury he had not felt in years, not since his own sister had been killed by Paiute raiders when he was 16. Olivia studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Why are you doing this? You do not know me. Does not matter. It is the right thing to do. Most men would not see it that way. I am not most men. A faint smile touched her lips, the first real expression of anything other than pain or fear he had seen from her. No, she agreed softly. I do not think you are. Over the next week, as the snow continued to fall and Eureka settled into the quiet rhythm of winter, Zachary found himself spending more and more time at Morrison's office. He told himself he was just checking on her recovery, making sure she had everything she needed. But the truth, which he was reluctant to admit even to himself, was that he enjoyed her company. Olivia was not like the women he usually encountered in mining towns, hardened by frontier life and wary of strangers. Despite everything she had been through, despite losing her entire family and nearly dying herself, she maintained a quiet dignity that impressed him. She was educated too, which surprised him. She could read and write fluently, had studied literature and history, could discuss politics and philosophy with an intelligence that matched any man he knew. My mother insisted on proper education, she explained one afternoon when he commented on it. She taught school in Philadelphia before she married my father. She made sure I had every advantage even after we moved west. She is not with you anymore, Zachary asked carefully. She died 2 years ago, cholera. Olivia's voice was steady, but he could see the pain in her eyes. It nearly killed my father. He never quite recovered from losing her. That is part of why we were heading to California. He wanted a fresh start, somewhere without all the memories. And your brother, Thomas, was 19. He was excited about California, talked about it constantly. He wanted to buy land, start a ranch. She looked down at her hands. Now none of them will see it. Zachary reached out without thinking and covered her hand with his own. I am sorry, sorrier than I can say. She did not pull away from his touch. Instead, she turned her hand over so their palms met, her fingers curling around his. You saved my life, Zachary. You gave me a chance to honor their memory, to live the life they wanted for me. I will never be able to repay that. You do not owe me anything, he said gruffly, but he did not let go of her hand. By the end of the second week, Morrison declared Olivia strong enough to leave his office, though she still needed considerable rest and care. The problem was where she should go. Eureka had no hotel suitable for a young woman alone, and the boarding houses were rough establishments full of miners and drifters. "She can stay at my place," Zachary said when Morrison raised the issue. "I have a small house on the edge of town, 2 bedrooms. She can have one and I will take the other. It will be proper enough." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "People will talk. People always talk. At least she will be safe and comfortable." Olivia, who had been listening to this discussion from the examination table, spoke up. "I cannot impose on you like that, Zachary. You have already done so much. It is not an imposition. The room is just sitting empty anyway." He looked at her seriously. "You need somewhere to recover properly, somewhere quiet. My place is perfect for that, and like I said, you will be safe there." She hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and practicality. Finally, she nodded. "If you are certain it is not too much trouble." "It is not." Moving her to his house was an adventure in itself. She was still too weak to walk far, and the snow made the streets nearly impassable in places. In the end, Zachary simply picked her up and carried her, ignoring the startled looks from the townspeople they passed. Let them talk, he thought. He had never cared much about gossip anyway. His house was modest but well built, a sturdy log structure with a stone fireplace and glass windows, a luxury in this part of Nevada. He had built it himself 3 years ago, when he had finally saved enough money to stop living in the bunkhouse at the ranch where he worked. The furniture was simple but functional, everything clean and orderly. He had always kept his space neat, a habit ingrained from his years in the cavalry before he came to Nevada. He settled Olivia in the spare bedroom, which he had been using mostly for storage. He had cleared it out the day before, bringing in a proper bed, a chest of drawers, a washstand. It was not fancy, but it was comfortable and private. "This is lovely," Olivia said, looking around with genuine appreciation. "Thank you, Zachary. You are welcome. Now you rest. I will make some dinner." He was not much of a cook, but he could manage basic meals well enough. That evening he made a simple stew with beef, potatoes, and carrots, thick and hot and filling. They ate at the small table in the main room, the fire crackling cheerfully in the hearth. "This is good," Olivia said, eating slowly but steadily. Her appetite was returning, which Morrison had said was an excellent sign. "It is nothing special. It is warm and made with care. That makes it special." She paused, studying him over her spoon. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you not married? A man like you, with a house and steady work, you must have had opportunities." Zachary shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. "Never found the right woman, I guess. Came close once, back in Missouri before I joined the cavalry. But she married someone else while I was away." He took a drink of water. "After that, I just focused on work. Easier that way." "Easier, maybe, but lonelier." "Maybe," he admitted. "What about you? You must have had suitors back in Virginia City." Now it was her turn to look uncomfortable. "A few. But my father was particular. He wanted me to marry someone educated, someone with prospects. Most of the men in Virginia City were miners or laborers, good men, but not what he had in mind for me." She smiled sadly. "He used to say I would find the right man when we got to California. He had grand plans for my future." "You can still have that future," Zachary said. "California is not so far. Once you are fully recovered, if you still want to go, I can help you get there safely." She was quiet for a moment, pushing a piece of potato around her bowl. "I do not know what I want anymore," she said finally. "Everything I thought I knew, everything I planned for, it all died with my family. I feel like I am drifting with no anchor." "Then maybe you should stay here a while, take some time to figure things out. There is no rush. Stay in Eureka." "Why not? It is not such a bad place. We have a school that needs a teacher if you are interested." The last one left 2 months ago to get married, and the town council has been desperate to find a replacement. With your education, you would be perfect for it." Olivia looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I never considered teaching, but I suppose I could do it. Mother always said I had a gift for explaining things." "Think about it," Zachary said, "but do not decide anything tonight. You need to focus on getting better first." As the weeks passed and winter deepened its grip on the mountains, a comfortable routine developed between them. Zachary would wake early, build up the fire, and make coffee before heading out to work at the ranch. He worked for James Sullivan, owner of the Triple S Ranch, the largest cattle operation in the area. The winter work was mostly feeding stock and mending equipment, preparing for spring calving. It was hard work but steady, and Sullivan paid fairly. He would come home in the early evening to find Olivia usually sitting by the fire, reading one of the books he had borrowed for her from the schoolhouse, or working on mending his shirts, which she insisted on doing despite his protests. They would eat dinner together, talking about their days, their past lives, their hopes and fears. Sometimes they would play cards or chess, a game she had taught him. Other times they would simply sit in companionable silence, content with each other's presence. Zachary found himself looking forward to those evenings more than anything else in his day. Olivia was easy to talk to, quick to laugh despite the sorrow she carried. She challenged him intellectually in ways he had never experienced before, making him think about things he had always taken for granted. And she was interested in him, genuinely interested, asking about his work, his past, his dreams for the future. He tried not to think too much about how he felt when she smiled at him, or the way his heart seemed to beat faster when their hands accidentally touched reaching for the same dish. He told himself it was just gratitude she felt, appreciation for saving her life and giving her shelter. Nothing more. She was educated, refined, from a good family. He was just a ranch hand, a former cavalryman with no prospects beyond his weekly wages. She would never see him as anything more than a friend, a protector. But sometimes, when he caught her watching him with those gray eyes, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, she felt something too. It was Morrison who forced the issue, though unintentionally. He stopped by one evening in late January to check on Olivia's progress and declared her fully recovered. "The wound has healed beautifully," he told them. "You will have a scar, but it should not cause you any problems, and you have gained back most of the weight you lost. Honestly, Miss Harper, you are in better health now than when I first saw you." "I have had excellent care," Olivia said, smiling at Zachary. "Indeed you have." Morrison looked between them, his expression knowing. "So, Miss Harper, what are your plans now? Will you be continuing to California?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Zachary found himself holding his breath, waiting for her answer. He had not asked her about her plans in weeks, afraid of what she might say. "Actually," Olivia said slowly, "I have been thinking about Zachary's suggestion, about teaching here in Eureka. If the position is still available, I would like to apply for it." Relief and joy surged through Zachary in equal measure. She was staying. She was actually staying. "The position is definitely still available," Morrison said with a chuckle. "The town council will be thrilled. When can you start?" "Whenever they need me." Within a week, Olivia had been officially hired as Eureka's new schoolteacher. The position came with a small salary and the use of the teacherage, a tiny cabin behind the schoolhouse. She insisted on moving into it, despite Zachary's protests. "It would not be proper for me to continue living with you now that I am healthy," she said firmly as she packed her few belongings. "People are already talking. I will not damage your reputation any further." "I do not care what people say," Zachary argued, "but I do. You have been so good to me, Zachary. I will not repay that kindness by making you the subject of scandal." She touched his arm gently. "Besides, it is only a few streets away. We will still see each other." He wanted to argue more, wanted to tell her that he did not want her to leave, that the house would be empty and cold without her. But he could see the determination in her eyes and knew it would be useless. She had made up her mind. The teacherage was indeed tiny, just one room with a small cooking area and a curtained-off sleeping alcove. But Olivia set about making it comfortable with a determination that impressed him. She borrowed linens and cooking supplies, bought fabric from the general store to make curtains, arranged her few books on a makeshift shelf. Within days, she had transformed the bare space into something that felt like a home. Zachary helped with the heavier work, moving furniture and chopping firewood. He told himself he was just being helpful, just making sure she was settled properly. But the truth was that he could not stand to be away from her for long. He missed their evening conversations, missed seeing her face across the dinner table, missed the sound of her humming as she went about her daily tasks. He realized with a mixture of terror and excitement, falling in love with her. The school opened in early February with 15 students, ranging from 6-year-old twin girls to a gangly 15-year-old boy who looked embarrassed to be there. Olivia handled them all with patience and good humor, her natural teaching ability evident from the first day. Zachary made a point of walking past the schoolhouse whenever he could, just to hear the sound of her voice through the windows, reciting lessons or reading stories. He was not the only man in town who had taken an interest in the new schoolteacher. Olivia was young, pretty, and respectable, a rare combination in a mining town full of rough men. Several of the miners tried courting her, bringing her flowers or small gifts, asking permission to walk her home from school. She was polite but firm in her refusals, making it clear she was not interested in romance. Zachary told himself he was glad she was turning them away, but he was not foolish enough to think it meant anything regarding him. She was probably just not ready for courtship after everything she had been through. Eventually, some man would catch her eye, someone educated and refined like her, and Zachary would have to watch her fall in love with another man. The thought made him physically ill. It was Mrs. Sullivan, the ranch owner's wife, who finally made him see sense. He had been helping her carry supplies into the ranch house one afternoon when she stopped him with a knowing look. "When are you going to tell that girl how you feel?" she asked bluntly. Zachary nearly dropped the crate he was holding. "Madam, Miss Harper, everyone in town can see you are sweet on her. Everyone except her, apparently, which is a shame because I think she feels the same way about you." "You are mistaken, madam. She is just grateful that I helped her. That is all." Mrs. Sullivan snorted. "Grateful? Zachary Powell, I have known you for 3 years, and I have never seen you act like a fool. Do not start now. That girl lights up like a Christmas tree every time you walk into a room, and you look at her like she hung the moon. If that is not love, I do not know what is." "Even if you are right," Zachary said carefully, "she is out of my league. She comes from a good family, had education and breeding. I am just a ranch hand. You are a good man with a steady job in your own house. You are honest, hardworking, and brave. You saved her life, for heaven's sake. What more could she want?" Mrs. Sullivan shook her head. "Stop selling yourself short and go talk to her. Life is too short to waste on fear." Her words stayed with him for days, rattling around in his head like stones in a can. Was it possible that Olivia felt the same way he did? He had caught her watching him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read. And she always seemed happy to see him, her face breaking into a smile whenever he stopped by the schoolhouse or invited her to dinner. But what if he was wrong? What if he declared his feelings and she rejected him? It would ruin the friendship they had built, make everything awkward and uncomfortable. He would lose her entirely, and that seemed worse than keeping his feelings hidden. The decision was taken out of his hands on a cold evening in late February. He had invited Olivia to dinner at his house, just as he did most Sunday evenings, a tradition they had established. She arrived looking troubled, her usual smile absent. "What is wrong?" he asked as he helped her out of her coat. "I had a visitor this afternoon," she said quietly, "after church. A man I had never seen before, asking questions about me, where I came from, how long I had been in town." Zachary felt ice form in his stomach. What did he look like? Tall, thin, with a scar across his jaw. He had mean eyes, Zachary, the kind of eyes that enjoy hurting people. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I said I did not discuss my personal business with strangers and walked away, but it frightened me." She looked up at him, fear clear in her face. "Do you think it could be one of them? The men from that night? I do not know, but I am going to find out." Zachary was already reaching for his gun belt, hanging by the door. "You stay here. Lock the door behind me and do not open it for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" "To ask around. Someone in this town must have seen the man. If he is who I think he is, he needs to know that you are under protection." He found the stranger at the Silver Dollar Saloon, drinking whiskey alone at a corner table. The man matched Olivia's description exactly, right down to the scar and the cruel eyes. Zachary walked up to him slowly, his hand resting casually near his gun. "I hear you have been asking questions about Miss Harper," he said without preamble. The man looked up at him, his expression flat and uninterested. "What if I have? I want to know why. That is my business." "See, that is where you are wrong." Zachary pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, keeping his hand near his weapon. "Miss Harper is under my protection. Anyone who bothers her has to answer to me. So I am asking again, why are you interested in her?" The man studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. "Heard she might have information about some outlaws who killed her family a few months back. Thought she might be able to identify them if she saw them again. You law, something like that. Show me a badge. Do not have one." "I am a bounty hunter." That made sense. The outlaws who had killed Olivia's family would have prices on their heads, and bounty hunters made their living tracking such men. But something about this man's story felt off. His eyes were too calculating, his manner too evasive. "Miss Harper does not want to be involved," Zachary said firmly. "She has been through enough. If you are looking for those men, you will have to find them without her help." "That's so." The man leaned back in his chair, his hand sliding toward his own gun. "What if I say she does not have a choice?" "Then we have a problem." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Around them, the saloon had gone quiet, other patrons sensing the potential for violence and moving back to give them room. Zachary kept his eyes locked on the stranger's face, watching for any sign of movement. "Easy now," the bartender called out. "I do not want any trouble in here." The stranger held Zachary's gaze for another few seconds, then slowly moved his hand away from his gun and raised it in a gesture of peace. "No trouble," he said. "I was just asking questions. No law against that." "There is against harassing women," Zachary said. "You stay away from Miss Harper. If I hear you have bothered her again, we will have more than words next time." He stood and walked out of the saloon, every nerve in his body alert for a bullet in the back. But none came. Outside, he took a deep breath of cold air and tried to calm his racing heart. He did not believe for one second that the man was a simple bounty hunter. Something about him had felt wrong, dangerous in a way that went beyond professional interest. When he returned to his house, Olivia was pacing by the fire, wringing her hands. She ran to him as soon as he walked in. "What happened? Are you all right?" "I am fine. I found the man, had a talk with him. He claims to be a bounty hunter looking for the outlaws who killed your family. Do you believe him? No, Zachary said honestly. I think he might be one of them, checking to see if you are here, if you are a threat. Olivia went pale. Then they are looking for me. Even after all this time, maybe, or maybe I am wrong and he is exactly what he claims to be. Zachary took her hands in his, feeling how cold and trembling they were. Either way, I meant what I said before. I will not let anyone hurt you. I will protect you no matter what. Zachary, you cannot put yourself in danger for me. These men are killers. So am I when I need to be. He saw the shock in her eyes and gentled his tone. I was in the cavalry for 4 years, Olivia. I fought in a dozen skirmishes against hostile tribes and outlaw bands. I know how to handle myself in a fight, and I know how to protect the people I care about. The people you care about, she repeated softly, her eyes searching his face. Is that what I am to you? Yes, he said simply. You are someone I care about very much. She was quiet for a moment, and he could see emotions flickering across her face, too quick to identify. Then she stepped closer to him, so close he could feel the warmth of her body, smell the faint lavender scent of her soap. I care about you too, she said quietly. More than I probably should, more than I ever expected to. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she must be able to hear it. Olivia, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to work up the courage for weeks now, but I am not good with words, so I am just going to say it plain. I love you. I have loved you probably since the day I found you in that snow, but definitely since the day you started living here, and I realized what it meant to come home to someone. I know I am not the kind of man you are supposed to end up with. I am not educated or refined. I am just a ranch hand who is decent with a gun and knows how to work hard. But I love you with everything I have, and if you will let me, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are happy and safe. The words came out in a rush, clumsy and desperate, but he meant every single one. Olivia stared up at him, tears spilling down her cheeks, and his heart sank. He had ruined everything, pushed too hard, too fast. Then she smiled, the most beautiful smile he had ever seen, and rose up on her toes to kiss him. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, her lips soft against his. Zachary froze for a second, stunned, then wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close, kissing her back with all the pent-up longing of the last 2 months. She made a soft sound and melted against him, her fingers tangling in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Olivia rested her forehead against his chest. You are exactly the kind of man I am supposed to end up with, she said firmly. You are brave and good and kind. You saved my life, Zachary. You carried me through a blizzard when I was too weak to go on. You took me into your home, asked nothing in return, treated me with respect and care. You made me feel safe for the first time since my family died. How could I not love you? You love me. He needed to hear it again, needed to be sure he had not misunderstood. I love you, she confirmed, pulling back to look into his eyes. I think I have loved you since that first night when you promised to protect me and I believed you. You are the best man I have ever known. Zachary kissed her again, deeper this time, and she responded with equal passion. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing in the scent of her. Marry me, he said. I know it is fast, but I do not want to wait. I want to make this official, make you mine in the eyes of God and man. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church, with most of the town in attendance. Olivia wore a new dress she had made herself from fabric Zachary insisted on buying, simple blue cotton that matched her eyes. Zachary wore his best shirt and pants, his hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven. Mrs. Sullivan cried through the entire ceremony, declaring it the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed. The stranger from the saloon never appeared again, and after a few weeks of vigilance, Zachary allowed himself to relax. Perhaps the man really had been just a bounty hunter, or perhaps he had decided that Olivia was not worth the trouble. Either way, he seemed to be gone for good. Olivia moved her few possessions into Zachary's house, and he found himself marveling at how complete his life suddenly felt. Coming home to her smile, eating meals with her, falling asleep beside her and waking with her in his arms, it all felt like a dream he was afraid to wake from. She continued teaching, and he continued working at the ranch, but their evenings and Sundays belonged to each other. They would take long walks when the weather permitted, exploring the hills around Eureka. They would read together by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder. They would make love with a passion and tenderness that left them both breathless and amazed. "I never knew it could be like this," Olivia confessed one night as they lay tangled together in the darkness. "My mother never spoke of such things, but I always assumed marriage was more duty than pleasure." "With the right person, it is both," Zachary said, running his fingers through her hair. "Or maybe we are just lucky." "We are definitely lucky," she agreed. "I almost died in that snow, Zachary. I was ready to lie down and let the cold take me, but then you appeared like some kind of guardian angel and carried me to safety. You gave me a second chance at life, at happiness. I will never take that for granted." "You gave me something too," he said quietly. "Purpose. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and sleeping and not much else. I did not realize how lonely I was until I met you. You made me remember what it feels like to hope for the future." Spring came to the mountains in a rush of melting snow and bursting green. The ranch work intensified with calving season, and Zachary spent long days in the saddle, checking on the herd. But he always made it home for dinner, no matter how tired he was. Olivia's presence had become as essential to him as breathing. In early May, she told him she was pregnant. He had been mending a fence behind the house when she came out to find him, her face glowing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I saw Dr. Morrison today," she said without preamble. "He confirmed it. We are going to have a baby." Zachary dropped the hammer he was holding, staring at her. "A baby? Are you certain?" "Very certain. He thinks it will come in late November or early December." A grin spread across his face, so wide it almost hurt. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby. Olivia, that is wonderful. You are happy?" she asked, laughing too. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am over the moon. I am the luckiest man alive." He set her down gently, suddenly worried. "Are you all right? Should you be working? Maybe you should stop teaching." "I am fine, and I am not stopping teaching. Women have babies every day, Zachary. We do not become fragile just because we are pregnant." "I know, but you have been through so much. I just want to make sure you are taking care of yourself." "I will take care of myself," she promised. "But you have to promise not to hover over me like a mother hen. I am carrying a baby, not dying." He promised, though it was hard not to worry. The memory of how close he had come to losing her that winter night never fully left him. But as the months passed, and Olivia continued to thrive, her body rounding with their child, he allowed himself to relax and simply enjoy the anticipation. The baby came on a cold December morning, exactly 1 year after Zachary had found Olivia in the snow. He held her hand through the long hours of labor, feeling helpless and terrified as she struggled and cried out. But when Morrison finally placed the squalling, red-faced infant in his arms, all the fear evaporated, replaced by overwhelming love. "A boy," Morrison announced with a smile. "Strong and healthy. Congratulations." "A boy," Zachary repeated, staring down at the tiny face, the miniature fingers curling around his thumb. Olivia, look at him. He is perfect. Let me see, she said weakly from the bed, and he brought the baby to her, settling him in her arms. She gazed down at their son with wonder. Hello, little one, I am your mama. What should we call him? Zachary asked. Olivia was quiet for a moment, studying the baby's face. Thomas, she said finally, after my brother, if that is all right with you. It is more than all right. Thomas Powell, it is a good, strong name. Thomas turned out to be a good, strong baby as well, healthy and loud and perpetually hungry. Olivia managed to balance teaching and motherhood with impressive skill, bringing Thomas to school with her in a basket until he grew too big and active. Then Mrs. Sullivan offered to watch him during the day, declaring that the ranch house was too quiet without children. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Zachary was promoted to foreman at the ranch, a position that came with better pay and more responsibility. They added a room onto their house for Thomas, then another when their daughter Sarah was born 2 years later, and another when their second son, Michael, arrived 3 years after that. Eureka grew as well, the silver mines bringing prosperity and more families. Olivia's school expanded from 1 room to 2, and eventually she had to hire an assistant teacher to help manage all the students. She loved the work, loved shaping young minds and watching children discover the joy of learning. But her favorite moments were still the quiet evenings at home, sitting by the fire with Zachary while their children played at their feet. Sometimes she would look at him and remember the desperate, frightened girl she had been, stumbling through the snow and certain she was about to die. Then she would remember the strong arms that had lifted her up, the steady voice that had promised to keep her safe, and she would feel overwhelming gratitude for the life they had built together. One evening, when Thomas was 10 and the younger children were asleep, Olivia found herself standing at the window, looking out at the snow falling softly in the darkness. Zachary came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "The night you found me. It was a night just like this, with the snow falling and the wind howling. I was so cold, Zachary, so tired. I remember falling into the snow and thinking that was it, that was where I would die. Then suddenly you were there, wrapping me in your coat, lifting me up. Best thing I ever did," he said, kissing her temple. "Finding you changed my life. You saved my life. You carried me when I was too weak to go on. And you gave me a reason to keep going," he countered. "Before you, I was just existing. You taught me how to really live, how to love, how to be happy. We saved each other, Olivia." She turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to touch his face. There were lines at the corners of his eyes now, silver starting to show in his dark hair. But to her, he was still the handsome cowboy who had appeared through the blizzard like a miracle. "I love you," she said. "More now than even the day I married you. You are the best man I know, and I thank God every day that he led you to me." "I love you too," he said, kissing her softly. "Always have, always will." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Eureka in white. But inside the Powell house, all was warm and bright, filled with love and laughter and the promise of many more years to come. Zachary had carried Olivia through the winter when she was too weak to go on, and in return, she had given him everything he had never known he needed: love, family, home, purpose. Their story had begun in desperation and survival, but it had become something beautiful, something lasting. And as they stood together in the quiet of the evening, watching the snow fall outside their warm home, both of them knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be, with exactly who they were meant to be with. The winter night when Zachary had found Olivia in the snow had been the worst and best moment of both their lives. The worst because of what had been lost and suffered, the best because it had brought them together. Sometimes the greatest loves begin in the darkest moments, when two people find each other against all odds and discover that together they are stronger than they ever could have been alone. Thomas ran into the room, breaking the quiet moment, his face excited. "Papa, can you tell us the story again, about how you found Mama in the snow?" Sarah appeared behind him, dragging her blanket. "Yes, please. It is our favorite story." Zachary and Olivia exchanged a smile. They had told this story many times, would tell it many more, but it never got old. It was their beginning, the foundation of everything they had built together. They settled in front of the fire, the children curled up beside them, and Zachary began. It was a cold December night, and a blizzard was blowing so fierce I could barely see in front of my face. I was tracking a runaway mare when I spotted something moving in the snow. Olivia listened to her husband's voice, warm and deep, telling their children how they had found each other. She watched their faces, rapt with attention even though they knew every word by heart. This was their legacy, she thought. Not just the story of survival, but the story of love that had grown from those desperate moments. When the story was finished and the children had been tucked into bed, Zachary and Olivia sat together on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in a thick blanket. The snow had stopped and the sky was clear, stars brilliant overhead. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked softly. "Taking on a half-dead woman with nothing but trouble following her, your life would have been much simpler if you had just ridden past that day. Simpler, maybe, but emptier. Lonelier." He pulled her closer. "I never believed in fate before I met you, but finding you that day at that exact moment when 5 minutes later would have been too late, that was not coincidence. That was meant to be." "I believe that too," Olivia said. "Everything I went through, as terrible as it was, it led me to you. And I would go through it all again if it meant ending up here with you, with our children." "You will never have to go through anything like that again," Zachary said fiercely. "I will make sure of it. I know you will." "You have been keeping that promise since the day you made it." She kissed him gently. "My strong, brave cowboy who carried me through the winter when I was too weak to make it on my own." "You were never weak," he corrected. "You survived things that would have broken most people. You walked for miles through a blizzard with a knife wound in your side. You lost everything and still found the strength to keep going, to build a new life. That is not weakness, Olivia. That is the strongest thing I have ever seen." "Perhaps we are both strong," she suggested. "Stronger together than apart. Definitely stronger together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching the stars wheel overhead. In the distance, a coyote howled, the sound lonely and wild. But here on their porch, wrapped in warmth and love, neither of them felt lonely at all. They had found what so many people spent their whole lives searching for: a true partner, someone who understood them completely, someone they would choose again and again no matter what hardships life threw at them. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were hard winters and failed crops, illness and injury, the normal struggles of frontier life. But through it all, Zachary and Olivia faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each passing season. Thomas grew into a fine young man, serious and thoughtful like his mother, skilled with horses like his father. He eventually took over as foreman of the Triple S Ranch when Zachary decided to start his own smaller operation. Sarah inherited her mother's love of learning and became a teacher herself, taking over the school when Olivia finally retired at 60. Michael, the youngest, turned out to have a talent for mechanics and ended up running the only automobile garage in Eureka when cars finally came to Nevada. Zachary and Olivia lived long, full lives, surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They never left Eureka, never saw any reason to. Everything they needed, everything they loved, was right there in that small Nevada town. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole town threw a celebration in their honor. The church was packed with people whose lives they had touched over the decades, students Olivia had taught, men Zachary had worked with, families they had helped through hard times. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears. When it was Zachary's turn to speak, he stood slowly, his hair now completely white, his body stiff with age but his eyes still bright and clear. He looked around at all the faces, then down at Olivia, who sat beside him with their hands clasped together. 50 years ago, he began, his voice still strong despite his years, I found a half-frozen woman in a blizzard. I carried her to safety because it was the right thing to do. I never imagined that simple act would lead to this, to a lifetime of love and happiness, to a family that fills my heart to bursting, to a legacy I am proud of. He paused, his eyes finding Olivia's. She was too weak to make that winter journey alone, so I carried her. But the truth is, she has been carrying me ever since. Carrying me through the hard times, lifting me up when I was down, making me better than I ever could have been on my own. So this celebration is not just about 50 years of marriage. It is about 50 years of partnership, of love, of two people who found each other when they needed each other most and never let go. The crowd erupted in applause, but Zachary barely heard it. He was too focused on Olivia, on the tears streaming down her weathered face, on the love shining in her eyes, as bright and fierce as it had been when she was 23 and he was 26. I love you, he mouthed to her. I love you too, she mouthed back. They lived another 10 years after that celebration, dying within 6 months of each other, as if neither could bear to be without the other for long. Zachary went first, peacefully in his sleep, one spring morning with Olivia holding his hand. She followed the next autumn, surrounded by family, her last words a whispered, I am coming, my love. They were buried side by side in the Eureka cemetery, their gravestones simple but eloquent. Zachary Powell, 1848–1925, Olivia Harper Powell, 1851–1925, together in life. Together in death, their love a beacon through the darkest winter. The story of how they met became legend in Eureka, passed down through generations. The tale of the cowboy who found a dying woman in a blizzard and carried her to safety, then fell in love with her and built a life that inspired everyone who knew them. It was a story about courage and kindness, about second chances and enduring love, about how the worst moments of our lives can sometimes lead to the best. And on winter nights when the snow fell heavy and the wind howled, parents in Eureka would tell their children the story of Zachary and Olivia, of how true love can be found in the most unexpected places, how one act of compassion can change everything, how the strongest bonds are forged in the fires of adversity. The Powell legacy lived on through their descendants, through the school that bore Olivia's name, through the ranch that still operated under Zachary's principles of fair dealing and hard work. But more than that, their legacy lived on in the example they had set, of two people who had faced hardship and loss and chosen love anyway, who had built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. Their great-great-granddaughter, also named Olivia, stood at their graves one December afternoon, exactly 100 years after that fateful night in the blizzard. She had just finished researching her family history, had read the newspaper accounts and personal letters, had pieced together the full story of that winter journey and everything that came after. "Thank you," she whispered to the cold stone. Thank you for being brave enough to love each other. Thank you for showing us what real partnership looks like. Thank you for surviving so that we could be here." The snow began to fall, soft and gentle, covering the gravestone with white. And as young Olivia turned to leave, she could have sworn she heard laughter on the wind, joyful and free, the sound of two souls who had found each other across the darkness and never let go, not even in death. The story of Zachary and Olivia Powell was more than just a romance. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the power of love to heal and transform, to the truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. It was a reminder that heroes come in many forms, sometimes in the shape of a cowboy who stops to help a stranger in a storm, and that angels sometimes appear as educated women who refuse to give up even when all hope seems lost. Their love had been tested by blizzards and outlaws, by poverty and hardship, by all the challenges that frontier life could throw at them. And it had survived, even thrived, because it was built on a foundation of mutual respect, genuine affection, and unwavering commitment. They had chosen each other every single day for 50 years, through good times and bad, through joy and sorrow, through youth and age. That, in the end, was the real story. Not just that Zachary had carried Olivia through the snow when she was too weak to go on, though that was how it started. The real story was how they had carried each other through life, sharing the burdens and multiplying the joys, building something that lasted long after they were gone. And somewhere, beyond the veil of death, two spirits walked hand in hand through eternal summer, finally freed from the cold and pain of that long-ago winter, but never forgetting the journey that had brought them together. Because some loves are strong enough to transcend even death, to echo through the ages, to inspire generations yet unborn. The winter wind blew across the Nevada mountains, carrying snow and cold and the promise of spring to come. And in Eureka, in the house that Zachary had built and Olivia had made a home, their descendants gathered around the fire and told the story once more, keeping the memory alive, keeping the love alive, keeping the legacy of two ordinary people who had done something extraordinary alive. She was too weak to make the winter journey, so the cowboy carried her the rest of the way himself. And in doing so, he carried them both to a happiness neither had dared to dream possible, to a love that would outlast mountains and rivers and time itself, to a story that would never truly end as long as there were hearts to remember and voices to tell it.